At 7:40 a.m., a missile lifts off from a mobile launcher positioned along the Iranian coastline. For a brief moment, nothing seems unusual. Just another heat signature rising above the horizon. But 8 seconds later, the radar aboard the USS Thomas Hudner detects the contact. 8 seconds. That may not sound like much. But in naval warfare, that's extremely fast. Still, speed isn't the real problem. Because what the operators inside the Combat Information Center are now seeing is something they've only ever encountered in simulations. The object accelerates rapidly. Mach 2. Mach 3. Mach 5. And it doesn't stop. Within seconds, it crosses into hypersonic territory. But what makes this contact truly dangerous is not just its speed. It's the way it moves. This is not a standard ballistic trajectory. There is no predictable arc. No stable flight path. Instead, the missile is maneuvering. Constantly. Small, precise corrections happening in real time. Micro adjustments that seem insignificant, but completely disrupt any attempt to calculate its future position. Inside the CIC, the atmosphere changes instantly. What started as a detection becomes a crisis. Within seconds, the tactical officer understands what they are dealing with. This is not a test. Not a drill. Not a false contact. Iran has just launched the Fattah. And now, they have less than 5 minutes to stop something designed to be unstoppable. The Fattah is believed to be Iran's first true hypersonic missile. In its terminal phase, it can reach speeds of up to Mach 13. That's over 4,000 meters per second. At that velocity, the rules of interception change completely. Traditional air defense systems rely on prediction. They calculate where a target will be and send an interceptor to that exact point. But that only works if the target follows a predictable path. And this one doesn't. A defensive missile like the SM-6 doesn't chase its target. It doesn't follow it through the sky. Instead, it calculates a future position and arrives there at precisely the right moment. Against subsonic or even supersonic threats, that approach works. It has worked for decades. But the Fattah changes that equation. Its maneuvering warhead continues to adjust its path during descent. Not dramatically. Not visibly. But enough to invalidate every prediction. Every calculation. Every solution. By the time an interceptor reaches its projected intercept point, the missile is no longer there. It's somewhere else. It's like trying to hit a bullet. That can change direction in flight. At 7:44, authorization to engage is granted. There is no more time to analyze. No more time to debate. 2 SM-6 interceptors are launched. The vertical launch system erupts as both missiles are fired in rapid succession. Within seconds, they are airborne. The system calculates a projected intercept point based on the missile's current trajectory. Everything is working exactly as designed. The first interceptor reaches the predicted location and finds nothing. The missile has shifted course. Just 1.8 degrees. A change so small, it's invisible to the human eye. But at Mach 13, that tiny adjustment translates into hundreds of meters of displacement. The interceptor detonates in empty space. The second interceptor follows. A new calculation. A corrected trajectory. Another attempt. Another miss. The missile adjusts again. Another fraction of a degree. Another impossible shift. 2 interceptors gone. 0 effect. The missile continues inbound. Unstoppable. Distance closing. Time running out. As the missile approaches, the ship's final layer of defense activates automatically. The Phalanx close-in weapon system. This is the last line of protection. The system designed to stop what everything else failed to intercept. A 20mm Gatling gun. Capable of firing up to 4,500 rounds per minute. Against subsonic missiles, it is extremely effective. Against slower threats, it is deadly. But this is not a normal threat. At Mach 13, the engagement window is almost non-existent. The system has less than a second to detect, track, and fire. Less than a second to make a difference. That translates to roughly 60 rounds in the air before the missile exits the engagement zone. 60 chances. Against a target moving at hypersonic speed. And maneuvering. The system calculates the probability of a successful hit. Extremely low. Almost negligible. But there is no alternative. The system fires anyway. Because it has to. The gun rotates. The radar locks. A stream of tracer rounds fills the air. And every single one misses. The missile continues inbound. Time to impact, 41 seconds. Inside the CIC, there is no panic. Only pressure. And decisions. Lieutenant Commander Okafor has studied this exact scenario. Not in combat. Not in real life. But in theory. Years earlier, he wrote about it. A hypothetical situation. A maneuvering hypersonic threat penetrating layered defense. At the time, it was just a concept. A possibility. Now, it's real. And there is only one option left. Instead of trying to hit the missile directly, he changes the approach entirely. He orders continuous fire from the ship's main gun. Not at the missile, but into the space it must pass through. The Mark 45 naval gun was never designed for this. It is a surface weapon, built to engage ships and land targets. But under the right conditions, it can do something else. Each shell is equipped with a proximity fuse. It does not need a direct hit. It detonates when it gets close enough, releasing thousands of high-speed fragments. A single explosion creates a sphere of destruction, roughly 30 meters across. But one explosion is not enough. Not against something this fast. So the idea is simple. And extremely difficult to execute. Create multiple explosions. Precisely timed. Perfectly aligned. Forming a corridor. A wall of fragmentation in the missile's path. The gun fires. One shell. Then another. Then another. Each one rising to a calculated altitude. Each one timed to detonate at a specific point in space. Within seconds, a corridor begins to form. A dense field of overlapping blast zones. The missile has no time to react. No time to evade. At Mach 13, it crosses 200 meters in a fraction of a second. It enters the corridor. Explosions trigger in sequence. The first miss. Then another. Fragments pass through empty space. Timing slightly off. Position not perfect. Then one connects. Fragments strike the control surfaces. Not enough to destroy the missile, but enough to damage it. Critically, the missile's guidance system reacts instantly. It detects asymmetry, instability. It attempts to compensate, to correct its course, to regain control. But at hypersonic speed, even a small imbalance becomes uncontrollable. The missile begins to oscillate. Small movements become larger. Control degrades rapidly. Oscillation becomes instability. Instability becomes rotation. Aerodynamic forces increase beyond structural limits. The missile is no longer stable. No longer controlled. Seconds later, it impacts the waters of the Persian Gulf. Just a short distance from the ship. The explosion sends a massive column of water into the air. Shockwaves hit the destroyer. Windows shatter. Crew members are thrown off balance. A brief fire breaks out. But the ship remains intact. No fatalities. Damage contained. Within minutes, control is restored. The threat is neutralized. But the situation is not over. Because now, the question changes. Not what just happened, but where it came from. The launch point had already been tracked. The missile originated from a mobile launcher on the Iranian coastline. A high ground position, chosen for maximum visibility and range. Mobile launch systems rely on speed. Fire. Move. Disappear. That was the plan. But the launch signature had been captured. Tracked continuously. Even as the launcher attempted to relocate. Within minutes, a response is initiated. 2 Tomahawk cruise missiles are launched. Flight time, just over 11 minutes. The launch crew had less than a minute of advantage. They needed several minutes to escape. They didn't have it. The first missile strikes while the launcher is still moving. The second follows seconds later. The target is destroyed. The system eliminated. Iran deployed one of its most advanced weapons. A missile designed to bypass every layer of naval defense. A system believed to be unstoppable. And it came close. Very close. But in the end, it failed. Not because everything worked perfectly. Not because the system was flawless. But because one decision, made in seconds, changed everything.